Good evening. I'd like to call to order the meeting for Bedford Township, the special board meeting, June 22nd, 2020. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, item 2 is the approval of the agenda.
No prayer?
Motion.
Oh, yes. Ms. Tennevery, could you have Bob come on and open us up in prayer?
Sure. Heavenly Father, we pray for the participants in the meeting tonight, that you would give them wisdom, that you would give them courage, you would give them discernment for the difficult task before them this evening. And Father, we put this in your hands and we pray these things in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Item 2 is approval of the agenda.
Motion to approve the agenda is submitted.
Support.
Okay, motion is supported by Mr. Clemens. Discussion. Seeing none, could you call the roll, Ms. Hirschberger?
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Montry?
Aye.
Ms. Jandisek?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, the motion passed 7-0. Item 3 is public comment. Comments limited to 2 minutes for board agenda items. Okay, item 4, unfinished business. 4A, approval of the 2021 general fund budget. Ms. Hirschberger?
All the corrections were made that were discussed in our last meeting. There were 2 questions that were asked. One was the finance director's salary being split. I did talk to both our current auditor and our previous auditor. Both gave me the same answer, that this is not unusual. It's done in multiple townships, but it is a board decision if we wanted to change how that is handled. So that's the answer for that one.
Quick
The
question
other
on,
one? Yeah.
just one quick question on that. Do we have a general idea of the starting pay of the new person that's coming in? I know we're not potentially calling it finance director, but do we have an idea? Because that could reflect in the budget as well.
I do not at this point. I was going to base it on experience and see what we bring in and then bring that to the board to make a decision.
Okay,
I would
that's
start
good
getting
enough.
lower than 55 though.
Okay.
And another thing that I had this discussion with Trudy also on the finance director or whatever the title is going to be, about where those funds are placed in the various accounts. We talked about that before on the format that I keep mentioning in Excel. So Trudy did tell me that with the finance director portion of his salary being in the sewer fund, those dollars actually come out of the sewer fund and not out of the general fund for that portion of his salary. The other thing, not to get too far in the weeds, I talked to Trudy about the format I keep talking about it in Excel, and she said there is a BS&A option that we can look at, and it might be the ticket without recreating the wheel, that you can go in and pick some buttons or boxes or whatever BS&A has, and she can get to those breakdowns. So one way or another, I think we're on the right track for that.
Ms. Stenberg?
Don't we currently use BSNA?
Yes.
Yes.
What, there's two different options for doing the budget or what?
No, Nancy, I'm talking about what I keep referring to, the budget in an Excel file and being able to put it into a pivot table. So a couple clicks of the button, you could just look at finance director and get all departments. Trudy said there is a tool option within BSNA that we should be able to do that. So now the finance person would not have to copy it, dump it in Excel and maneuver data. That way, that would be great if we could just dump it right out of BSNA, so no duplications.
So you're talking about just the finance director or the whole budget?
Well, it would be the whole budget, but I'm just saying
Okay,
the finance
all right.
director could do it. That was just an
Okay.
example of how we could click the finance director and just pull all those funds.
No, I knew that could be done. I just didn't know that that's what David was missing. I'm sorry. Okay.
Okay, sorry, Trudy, go ahead.
That's all right. The other question was the capital improvement fund. We wanted to be able to put money in a fund to start saving for the future. There is such a thing. I looked it up. It is called Township Improvement Revolving Fund. And we can transfer funds from the general fund into this fund, and then with board approval out of this fund back into the general to repair whatever needs repaired. It will take a resolution from the board to be able to create this account. It would be account number 446, but that would be an easy thing to create a resolution, and then we can move the monies that we have put in the CIP fund currently in our budget. We would just move them to the 446 after I have this resolution approved by the board.
Very cool.
If that's what this board would like to do.
Can you put that on the next agenda?
I can.
Okay, Ms. Stenberg?
Just to clarify for Craig, who asked the question about that being the capital outlay for maintenance or capital improvement, it's not the same thing, correct?
Correct.
Trudy?
This would be a special revolving fund that would just be for capital improvement plan items. So whatever our plan has in there, that's what these funds would be used for. There's a cap on it of 2 million, but I don't see us putting 2 million into this fund, but it's a possibility.
So are you going to develop the resolution for the next board meeting?
Yes.
Well, would you put in there, we had talked before about 35,000 or 50,000 annually. Could you leave a blank for that so we can decide what amount should be annually put into that fund?
The resolution won't be amounts. The resolution will be just to create a line item 446 revolving funds. It takes board action to even use that number in the unified code.
I understand that, but I also, in the classes that I went to, they talked about having an annual amount so that it's not, so that the the planning commission, when they're reviewing, can count on funds down the road, knowing how much is going to be put in that fund every year at budget time. So I think at some point there should be some resolution or some kind of board action that states how much will be budgeted into the capital improvement fund. Otherwise, if it fluctuates every year, nobody's going to know how much is available for whatever improvements need to be made out of that fund.
I agree. I think it'll be a separate resolution, but I agree there needs to be something.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Trudy, can you tell the public how much we've actually saved in this year's budget? What's the total amount of funds? I know it was in the,
So we are still using part of our fund balance a little over $1 million from our fund balance to balance this year. So the fund balance will still have 1.6 at the end of this year. Then for next year, we're only going to use 535,000 out of it to balance this budget that we're approving. So we're only taking half of what out of fund balance that we did last fiscal year, but we are going to use 535,000.
And that's with no projections of reductions, right?
That's with what we currently think we're going to have is a 40% reduction in our
You know,
revenue.
I thought all the numbers we were saying were with no projections.
No,
That's what I know we
we
talked about a
definitely projected it.
40% reduction. I know we talked about the 40% reduction, but nobody on this board knows what the reduction is. So next year, if the projection right now is 0 for next year, what would our savings be?
I don't have that in front of me.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Well, you're using the word savings. It's really not a savings because it's just not budgeting to the extent that we've budgeted in the past. But when you say savings, what you're saying is the clerk's budget was such and such, and now it's 200,000 lower, so we're saving that money. But we're not really saving. It's not a savings. It's just budgeting to our fiscal ability through our revenue, which is state shared revenue as well as property tax and
Okay.
quite a few other things.
Okay, I guess I said it wrong. So,
Maybe this will answer your question. Our expenses are negative 20% from last fiscal year. So we've cut about 20% of the budget. Almost 21%. Does that help at all?
yes. Yeah, so that's about $900,000.
Approximately, yes.
Yes.
So yes, Paul, to your point, we did talk about that in those numbers. I remember Dave did take that down when we talked about a potential 40% hit.
And that's why I think when Lamar Frederick got on the last meeting and said, how are you going to cover this $1 million? That's if we have a 40% reduction in fall. I think
Correct.
we're confusing the public a little bit when we speak of numbers and we don't know the reduction. Okay, in the fall, if we have a 40% reduction, correct, that is $1 million. But if it's only 20, we're right on. Just like
Correct.
Trudy just said. So
And-
we won't know to the fall. That's when we have to come back to the drawing board and say, hey, here's what we have to do.
Right, and this board did agree that after August, when we know those numbers, we would come back and look at this budget again.
Yep.
And my suggestion is, because of all the unknowns, and we know it won't happen, but if just to say the state came back and cut 5% and we plan on that 20, we leave it and we try to budget to it. And if we have to make an adjustment down the road because something is definitely needed, then we come back for the money. I mean, we need to try to work as hard as we can to spend less and keep that going.
Okay, any more comments or questions for Ms. Hirschberger? Okay, seeing none, look for a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the general fund appropriation resolution for fiscal year 2021 as presented.
Second.
Okay, motion is supported by Ms. Januzak. Discussion? Okay, seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Hirschberger votes aye. Ms. Janusik?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Peroni?
Aye, the motion passed 7-0. Item 4B, approval of the 2021 special revenue funds budget. Ms. Hirschberger?
Again, corrections were all made, and unless someone has a question or I missed something, I think I have them all, though. All the changes that were requested.
Anybody have any comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, I look for a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the special revenue fund appropriation resolution for fiscal year 2021 as presented.
Second.
Second.
Okay, motion by Ms. Hirschberger, supported by Mr. Steiner. Discussion? Seeing none, could you please call the roll?
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Ms. Jandesak?
Aye.
Mr. Montry?
Aye.
Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. Item 4C, discussion on the RFP for a finance director. Ms. Hirschberger?
I presented each one of you with the RFP and then a job description that would go with that and what we are looking for in a candidate. Now, the finance director, it doesn't have to be called that. The name can stay the same, but I do not think at this point that needs to be a department head position. It falls under the clerk, and I think it should just be, I mean, even if we leave it at finance director, I don't want it to be a department head, but we could change the name to finance assistant. I'm open for suggestions.
Ms. Tinneberry?
I totally agree with Trudy, and it is a position under the clerk's supervision. However, it is a board position that it's not like the deputy clerk, but the person is under the clerk's supervision. However, other townships call it just the accountant. And some townships use administrative assistant to the clerk. I think that giving it the finance director title, it doesn't send the correct message, because for me, and I maybe the rest of you have a different opinion, but a director is someone who directs and who is in charge of that department, finances, not without the supervision of the clerk, of course, but the director handles all of the things that we need, such as an update in the budget. Someone said to me once that he's not required to babysit other departments, but a director, in my thinking, would be someone who not really babysits, but is in charge of keeping other departments in line. And I think if we're going to pay that salary that has been talked about and that this current finance director has, I think that there's more responsibility required of that person under the supervision of the clerk. But I would be in favor of administrative assistant or accountant or something more along those lines.
What about just township accountant? I mean, that's Mr. Steiner.
I apologize. I wanted to try to get something out to everyone today, and I did not get a chance to. As I told you, it's a pretty crazy day with air conditioning going out. So I have a couple suggestions. I know Trudy has a really good start here. The first thing I do agree with, though, is the title. But I also don't want to underestimate the title, because then sometimes you will get no applications because it's not enough for somebody and they think it's a low paid position, period. So just a couple quick comments I had. So on the one page where we talked about salary, it's just, I know it's simple language, but I'd like to change from salary and benefits to be determined depending on qualifications. And I would like to call that commensurate with qualifications and education. And I'm sorry, experience and education qualifications. On the mission statement, where it said under the direction of the township clerk, I made a suggestion here where it says under the direction of the township board and daily supervision by the township clerk. The finance, whatever we call it, administrator, finance manager, maybe. Manager doesn't mean it has to be a department head, but under the supervision of the clerk will perform a variety of
I like the thought of manager, accountant. I mean, I don't really like the thought of assistant. I mean, I get this, whoever it is will be assisting Trudy. But I agree with you. If you want to draw that right person, the title's gonna have to be different than assistant, in my opinion. Anybody else have any thoughts?
I think sometimes when some people see the word assistant, even though it's not always, but a lot of people see assistant and they think of it as a clerical role. The only other way is if you called it, finance administrator, anything, but I think director is too high of a level. And going back to what Nancy said, if you want to call it a director, then that person would have full responsibility to rein in each department head and all that. And I don't think that's where we want to be.
Can I hear your opinion, Trudy?
Of all of those or just the title?
Of all of those, I mean, I don't want to vote on them if I don't hear, someone else's input.
To be honest, I couldn't write it as fast as he was going through everything.
Oh, of course.
Thank you, Trudy. That'll make it easier for you.
I would like it, as far as the mission statement, that caught my ear right away. That maybe under the Bedford Township Board at the direction of the clerk, because I'm the one who's going to be directing him. Otherwise, it's going to look like he's got 7 directors. So
I like that, but I think it's good to put the board in there. That way it's.
I don't care if the board's in there at all. I mean, because they are under the board, but I would like it under the clerk's direction. So it doesn't look like he's got 7, he or she has 7 people directing them.
The only reason I suggested that was, I know it's semantics, but direction means they take direction from nobody but. Whereas I said they take direction from 7 board members, and the clerk has full authority and supervision over. And I may have skipped it over. I thought I put day-to-day operations supervision by the clerk. I'll have to look that back up again.
Well, I like what Trudy had to say. I do not think that they do take direction from the board. I think the board deals directly with the clerk. Yes, this person will need to come before the board regularly, and that will be in the job description that the board decides on. But the thing of it is, do any of the other employees, except the, I mean, I know the deputies don't, but do any of the other employees take direct direction from the board? I don't think so. And I don't think the board is in the business of the daily operations. That's why each elected, full-time elected person has a set of responsibilities put down by the state. So I like the word manager, or I just don't think that direction has that same connotation, or that I should say, I just don't think that the board should have direction over this employee, because what if our direction has something that impedes the clerk in her many, many responsibilities? She doesn't just manage the finance person. So I would hesitate to allow the word that the board has direction over this person.
I'm going to go back to, I'm going to get it a little bit into the weeds on this. Then I want assurances that next time I ask a finance person for information, that I don't get thrown off and saying, I can't give it to you without talking to the clerk.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I agree with that, but can't you say that to the clerk, and the clerk gives that, because you don't know what that finance person has on his plate at the moment. I see what you're saying, and I agree with that. That should never be.
And
I agree
that's
with
okay.
that too. I'm sorry.
That's okay, but as long as that's understood by the finance person, because what if the clerk is not there? They should not ever hesitate to give a board member information.
True.
Mr. Clements?
I just was going to say that I think we have to be careful in this document that we don't try to correct habits which were formed over the last umpteen years, as opposed to what the job responsibilities are. And then under the specific job title and task, which we still have to work on, that's where, Rick, I think we all would agree that communication needs to be improved in a couple of areas, tightened up a little. But I think they're just two very different things. And if we're not careful, we're going to blend the two documents. And I think it actually gets a little more confusing than it is clear. Mm-hmm. So I think we're really on step A, and complete me, I've written down step B, and that won't get forgotten about.
Right, I would like that too. I was just going to say, when someone requests something from the finance director, if they would copy the clerk, that way the clerk is aware of what is being asked and can make sure that that is followed up with and that information is given out to a board member.
That's kind of the same way with the maintenance department. You know, I've asked all board members other than the clerk to go through the supervisor to have the maintenance department do work. So it's kind of the same thing. So as long as Trudy, you know what I mean, is communicating that to whoever it is, I think it'd work fine just, you know, via word of mouth. I think it just got kind of lost a little bit, not on Trudy's end with the last finance director, Mr. Montreal.
So I just wanted to ask for clarification, because I felt like there was kind of two like directions to go. One would be like the finance director, and one would be name or not named, but you're looking for an accountant who's going to do data entry more or less, or you're looking for like a finance director who's going to be kind of not on their own, but I don't know a better way to put it. And they would be more consultative, I would think. And I would think you're looking at two completely different roles, two completely different salaries, two completely everything. I just want to like clarify that the board's looking, it sounds like more in the direction of we're going to look for that basic accountant that will be, like I said, more or less, it's going to be data entry. You're not going to be looking for, like I said, like consultation as much. Is that correct?
We will be looking for someone with a bachelor's degree in accounting or associates with the experience. And I'm going to be looking for something either in governmental accounting or nonprofit experience with a CPA firm.
Ms. Stanbury?
I was gonna hold this off, but I'm personally not in favor of someone with an associate's degree, mainly because with a $5 million plus budget, I think that needs to be someone that has, I know you've got experience in there and all of that too, but I would prefer that it states bachelor's degree, at least a bachelor's degree. Just for that reason. I mean, I don't think someone fresh out of junior college or community college would have the ability to manage a $5+ million budget. Just my opinion.
I just didn't want to make it too narrow where we're going to get, salaries higher than we can pay, because we're not going to pay enough for someone who can go to a business and make $90,000 to $100,000. So
True.
that's why I added the associate's degree with substantial work experience. I just didn't want to close us and possibly not get the applicants.
Okay, I understand that, and I have no experience in accounting and what it takes to get an associate's degree. I was just concerned, but okay, I get you.
Mr. Steiner? His hand, I don't think you meant for your
Still up
hand to
by
be up.
accident.
Okay. Anybody else have anything on this to add?
I do like finance manager.
Yeah, I like that too.
That.
That was Rick.
It doesn't matter who it is.
That's good.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter who it is. We just need to agree on it. So
Yeah, no, I like that too.
Oh, I did have another thing. I'm questioning the posting that I saw said township application, and I don't know too many places that are looking for a professional position that requires them to fill out the company's application. Is there a reason for the application? I mean, I was thinking resume and a cover letter.
That's fine. If they accept the position, our application has that little piece at the bottom that you have to sign, agreeing to background checks and such. So I wanted them to sign something, and the application has that.
I see. Okay, I didn't realize that. All right.
Okay. Any more comments, questions? Okay, let's move on then.
So can I just get it straight? So we can, because I want to be able to publish this. Are we good with publishing this? Do you want me to send it out one more time? See if anybody has any other critiques. I can do that tomorrow so I can get this published as soon as possible.
yeah, Trudy, just take a look at what I sent you.
Okay.
Ms. Tinberg?
I don't have any problem with publishing it. I would like, when you publish it, to send a copy to the board that this is what's being published. However, my question is the interview process, which I realize is down the road. I would like the board to determine who's going to do that. I would prefer that there's a trustee, any trustee on that committee for interview. I mean, it could be Krista and Trudy and a trustee, but I just would prefer that the trustee, since the trustee position is heavily weighed on the finances, I just think a trustee would be coming from a different perspective.
I'm a little concerned too. Where all will this be published?
I am to publish this, of course, on our website because we have to put it there. I am going to send it to MTA because I know they can publish it and get experience. The Michigan Clerks Association because they have finance directors looking there. And then, of course, the treasurers, Michigan treasurers.
We could put it on, does anybody have a LinkedIn account? I mean, we could put it out on LinkedIn too. I know that's a networking, for positions and stuff like that too. So, okay, I just was curious. Sounds like you got some pretty good coverage. We'll put it on Facebook, obviously, and get some, community action going. So it shouldn't be, I kind of thought about this, should we be looking for somebody like we did with our fire chief, on something like this, but I think we have enough people in the general area that have this type of experience, I would think. So, okay. Are we looking for a motion on this, or?
I don't think
I don't really think we need one. Do we?
I'll
Okay.
just put everything together, the ideas we came up with, and I'll shoot it out to the board before I publish.
Okay. All right, moving on to comments from the public. Comments limited to 5 minutes for each individual. Okay, let's move on to board comments, and if somebody calls in, we can go back to it. Ms. Tinneberry?
Well, before the interview process starts, are we going to determine who the interview committee is, for one?
Is there a trustee that would like to be on it?
I'm not opposed to being a part of it, depending on the number of applications and how many we bring in for interview. I might need to preclude myself based on the time, but I'm certainly willing to jump in. Could we do this? Can we get to where we have an applicant pool and then decide of that pool where the threshold is, Nancy, and maybe determine the trustee then? Would that be okay?
I'm
with
good.
you?
Why
Okay.
don't we
good
just
with
say,
that.
why don't we just say it'll be the treasurer, the clerk, and a trustee? Okay,
I'm good with that.
That's fine. And Trudy, I'll volunteer if I'm still working from home. If we could, maybe middays, I can pull out and do my lunch hour and come out and do it as well.
Okay.
And then my other question was, I thought there was another item on the agenda.
no, that's it.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Montry?
The only thing I would say is to Nancy's point about the fund the 446 fund that Trudy was talking about, that has been voted on by this board last year, that it was going to be 35,000 for building / major capital and $25,000 for equipment for dumps, etc. So when that is established, that this board has voted on that. That's all I got.
Okay, Mr. Steiner?
I'm good this evening.
Hey, Mr. Clements?
I have nothing. Thank you.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Well, I just want to thank the board for the major work that has been put into this budget and making some reductions. There were years when I have not voted for the budget for the very reason of how it was determined and how the funds were distributed. And so I'm very thankful to see that this board is willing to make cuts when cuts are necessary. Some of them are unfortunate. I'm sad about the cuts in the employees, but when, I don't remember that saying, when God gives you lemons, you make lemonade or something. But we made it, we had to do what we had to do, I guess, let's put it that way. And then my other comment, I received, maybe some of you did too, I probably received more comments from the public regarding disgruntled thoughts and ideas because I am a little more outspoken and can be controversial on different topics. Today I received not just emails, I received collective information in different formats about the finance director, and the rumor out there is that I heard today that we fired the finance director. I have here, I don't know how many of you else have it, but I asked Trudy for a copy of the letter of resignation, And it says, as of June 29th, I am resigning from Bedford Township. So there was no firing, there was no forcing, there was no ultimatum. It is what it is, and the decision was made freely by the current finance director. So I just wanted that out there when I told people today that that was not fact, that I would get them the facts, which this letter is the facts. I felt I needed to say that publicly, so thank you.
Ms. Januzak,
I have nothing.
Ms. Hirschberger.
I have nothing.
Okay, and I have nothing as well, except for to echo Ms. Tinberry's comments that we have done some major work on this budget. We are prepared for a shortfall in the state shared revenue this fall, upwards in 21%. So that's roughly $900,000. That's a lot of money out of a $5 million budget. So like I said, I've said the last few meetings, I'm proud of this board and the work we've done, and that we'll continue to do, especially in fall when we find out exactly what the reduction is. If it's zero, we've got some funds we can work with and do some projects. But if it's 40, we have to come back to the drawing table and cut more out of it. So we just don't have the funds to get us by for 2 years, to hit the shortfall. So thank you, everybody. Mr. Steiner?
You forgot to ask Mr. Goldsmith if he had anything.
Mr. Goldsmith, do you have anything?
Just give you an update. I was asked to provide an update on the Prairie Woods litigation, and the update is the individuals who were sued by the township for the zoning ordinance violation were reserved with the summons and complaint. And the reason for that is when we can, to save expenses, we serve by certified mail return receipt. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the United States Postal Service would not actually make contact with an individual and obtain their signature. They would just write on the green card that's returned COVID-19, indicating that the mailing was delivered, but they did not receive a personal signature acknowledging receipt. So the clerk's office wouldn't accept COVID-19 responses from the USPS. So we obtained an order for alternate service from the court. They were served, and the clock is ticking now, during which they have to answer. We had the first time they were served, we did have discussions with them. And I haven't been by personally to check. I did go by once afterwards that the trucks and the vans would be removed, except for one truck, which the gentleman said he would not keep at his industrial or commercial location. So that still is an issue. It's a major issue where it's being parked. We couldn't reach a consensus on how that was going to be resolved. So we're moving forward with that lawsuit.
Mr. Steiner, are you sitting in quicksand, Mr. Steiner? You look like you keep sinking.
That's weird. I haven't touched my computer. My screen must be just starting to drop on its own.
I did get a phone call from the owner and had some conversation about it. And so I basically said, you have to continue on with what you presented. So he wants to keep the truck, and the truck's a problem. So we were hoping for compliance, but we didn't get it fully. So any more comments from the board? George, no public comments waiting? Okay, we stand adjourned. Okay. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you.